Hot on the trail of the artificial superintelligence named Ultron, it was clear that Tony Stark may have finally met his intellectual match. You see, Iron Man, for all his gizmos and gadgets, relied largely on brains, not brawn, to outwit the bad guys. But when Tony must track down a rogue AI in the depths of the internet, he knows that he needs a new approach. He quickly realizes that he's just a guy looking for a needle in the world's biggest haystack. A technician then asks Tony, "So how do you find it?" And his reply is just perfect. Simple. You bring a magnet. As we stare out across the vast expanse of the Wash, looking for what Dr. Mark Morris referred to as a needle in a stack of needles, I think of Iron Man. Like Tony Stark, we don't have any superpowers, but we do have our intellect and cutting-edge technology on our side.
The kind of surveys that could pick up remains in the ground, like ground penetrating surveys and metal detecting, is that the amount of area you have to cover is so enormous that it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. If it's found, it might well just be by accident.
Now, before we get stuck in the mud, let's quickly catch everyone up. We've dug into the story of how King John, the baddie in Tales of Robin Hood, presumably lost his royal treasure, or at least part of it, while trying to cross the Wash, a vast marshland on the east coast of England, over 800 years ago. Legend tells us, on October 12, 1216, literally thousands of King John's soldiers drowned, and his precious treasure was lost when baggage carts got stuck in the deep mud while taking a shortcut across the Wash. The lost treasure included the crown jewels of England, valued today at over $100 million US. In episode 2, we took a deep dive into King John himself, the man, the myth, the monster. And we covered events which led up to him having his precious treasure with him while trying to cross the Wash. And as for the Wash itself, we figuratively speaking dove deep into that in our last episode, so everyone would understand the vast scale and complexity of the epic treasure hunt before us. So yes, we've covered a lot of ground thus far, both figuratively and literally. But one question remains at the center of our story. If one of the richest treasures in English history is just buried in the mud, why hasn't anyone been able to find it yet?
When you get to see and touch and hold these things for the first time, that's the true treasure to me.
We've covered many of the facts and theories of how and where King John's baggage train was lost while crossing the Wash. But surely there must be some modern technology that could have uncovered the treasure by now, right? The journey to find the lost crown jewels has captured the imaginations of countless people over the centuries. And despite every local having a theory as to where the treasure's located, as well as several extensive, not to mention expensive, searches of the Wash over the last few centuries, none have yet to find even a single coin.
Everyone's got an idea of where it is. Everyone knows it's under their mother-in-law's kitchen floor.
That brings us to today. We stand at a key moment in this epic treasure hunt, where, for the first time in over 800 years of searching, cutting-edge technology may finally give us the first real opportunity to locate King John's fabled lost treasure. And treasure hunter Raymond Kosschuk, who invented some of this technology, is convinced he knows exactly where to find it. So, grab a shovel and let's get dirty. I'm Daryl Perkins, and this is Blood and Treasure, the last days of Bad King John. But before we turn to satellites and fire up drones equipped with aerial magnetometers, it's important to know exactly what we're looking for. So much of the technology that we're going to lean into this episode relies on those details. So let's start with what we know. Over the years, historians, archaeologists, and treasure hunters, both amateur and professional alike, have all come to the consensus that the king, or at least his baggage train, would have likely taken a route from Walpole Cross Keys in Norfolk to Long Sutton or Sutton St. Mary in Lincolnshire, a distance of approximately 6.5 miles as the crow flies. But keep in mind, This is crossing the wash we're talking about, and crossing the wash back in 1216 would have been anything but a straight line.
All the historians were all transfixed on one area. It's not there, but I do really believe I've got it.
We know for certain, based on Knight's Hospitaller records, King John's lost crown jewels existed prior to 1215. There are records of exactly what English crown jewels, or royal regalia if you will, consisted of. The treasure included royal regalia from Empress Matilda, who was King John's grandmother, and also possibly some treasure from the time of King Alfred the Great, who was king of the Saxons back in the 9th century. We also know from royal edicts that King John took back his precious treasure from Castle Corfe and all the other locations around the country where it had been kept for safekeeping in 1215 and 1216. Historical records tell us that King Henry III, King John's son, was crowned King of England in late 1216 and crowned without all the royal regalia that would have been expected of a royal coronation at that time.
Henry III's coronation after King John's death took place in extremely trying circumstances, and this was when over half of the kingdom had been taken by Louis, the son of the King of France. The kingdom was at war, and young Henry III and the remainder of the Plantagenet court had been pushed out to the West Country and had to have this very hurried coronation at Gloucester. So the form that coronation took and the regalia that was used doesn't necessarily represent everything that was potentially available at the time. It represents what they could get together in very trying circumstances when they'd lost most of the country. However, it's not unreasonable to think that John was carrying with him the most prized possessions that he had when he was travelling. He most certainly would have been carrying any particular sacred objects and relics that were precious to him and precious to his chapel.
That was Dr. Sophie Ambler, historian and medieval scholar. So, we've got a pretty good idea of what King John's precious treasure would have consisted of, and a pretty solid lock on when the treasure was lost, down to the day and even hour of high tide on October 12, 1216. We know the approximate length of King John's baggage train and even how fast it was moving. So, it should be as easy as grabbing a map and a protractor and doing some basic math, right? Wrong.
My name is John Casey. I'm the president of Geoscan Incorporated. Basically, it looks at the resonance feature of gravity waves coming up from the Earth's core. And just like in an MRI machine, as that gravity wave or magnetic wave passes through the densities of your body, it's the same thing when it passes through the densities of metals or materials in the ground. So each element on the periodic table has a specific frequency at the atomic level. And as the magnetic waves pass through these different elements, and their frequencies, it's a carrier wave, and it carries that frequency to the surface.
As you can see, John's equipment is a little more advanced than the metal detector I bought at Radio Shack way back in the day. You may recognize John from the History Channel show Lost Gold of World War II.
If you're looking for a treasure, you're looking for a band structure, no matter where it is. You don't have to be planted right over the top of it. You don't need to know exactly where it is. The resonance signature, as it comes up, the sensors will pick up that data, and as it passes through a gold object or silver or any metal, it can quantify where it is, or how much it is, where it is, and specifically what depth it's at.
It's called NMRI, or Nuclear Magnetic Resonance Imaging. NMRI is a satellite-based technology that uses a proprietary system of mathematical algorithms and various radar frequencies to pinpoint any element in the periodic table. We know, for example, that Pope Innocent III gave King John rings of emerald, sapphire, garnet, and topaz, all of which would make fantastic targets to search for. Another technology that I immediately thought of when we embarked on this adventure was LiDAR. LiDAR stands for Light Detection and Ranging, and is sometimes called 3D laser scanning. It's a method for determining distances by targeting an object or a surface with a laser and measuring the time the reflected light takes to return to the receiver. LiDAR can be used to make digital 3D representations of large areas of the Earth's surface, or in my case, recently by California Highway Patrol to claim I was speeding, but I digress.
6 miles is pretty long. I would imagine that in LiDAR probably wouldn't help you out too much because estuaries change a lot. Floodplains change constantly. So it could change, the day after the wagon fell in. But if it's there, the technology would be able to see it, find it, or figure out exactly where it was. The broad view first on the satellite, and then sensors on top of that just hone in right on the target. And again, if there's, gold in the target, it'll say, okay, as long as it's in one area, and even if it's not, it can say, okay, 10 feet away, I got a target that's gold that is, we're seeing like it's a 6-ounce target or it's a 10-ounce target, meaning maybe it's a crown or maybe it's a handful of coins. We're seeing a silver scepter. It's long. It's, showing this and it's silver. And if there's nothing there, then there's nothing there. At least you eliminate that area and you now move to a different location.
Well, now we're starting to get somewhere. So now that NMRI exists, why hasn't it been used to unearth pretty much every treasure ever lost?
This technology really is like, I'm calling it end-game technology because nobody had it before. I mean, the government's had it for 40 years. They've been looking at all kinds of things and, they just never released it to commercialization. There's lots of people out there doing GPR and seismic and all kinds of work. There's thousands of geophysicists out there, and that's competition. So when you have one piece of technology that can do everything that you need it to do, you want to keep it out of everybody's hands as quickly as possible. I got a good handle on it and I'm going to use it to find as many things as possible. And it's not really about the treasure. It's per se itself. Maybe worth $100,000, maybe worth $10. It's the story. It's proving what happened was real, and we're proving it by showing you or the world this treasure.
As you can imagine, John's been inundated with requests from treasure hunters to help them uncover hidden treasures from across the globe.
I'm bombarded every day with, 1,000 requests for treasure. Come to find my treasure. We'll give you more. We'll give you half. We'll give you a dime. Everybody has treasure and nobody has any money. And because it's not, just like a metal detector and I'm swinging it and I say, yeah, there's your target and dig here, that's just not the case.
If you're a fan of The Curse of Oak Island on History Channel, as I am, you know from all their aerial shots that Oak Island is not that big. I looked it up, and the island is a little more than a square mile. Furthermore, the Money Pit area, which is where it's believed a great treasure was buried on Oak Island, is perhaps a quarter of a mile square at the very most. And yet, Marty Lagina, who has a background in oil and gas exploration and a dedicated team of experts, has yet to locate the missing treasure after 10 plus years and millions of dollars spent searching. Where does that leave us? While cutting edge, NMRI is still considered by many, especially those in academia, to be unproven, and there is even newer technology, let's call it experimental technology, that could help us uncover King John's lost treasure. Enter Raymond Kosschuk.
My name is Raymond Kosschuk. My background is I'm an electrical and mechanical engineer.
So when I first read of Raymond's search for King John's lost treasure in a small local paper, to be honest, I was skeptical that he really had anything new to offer. I dismissed the story as just another metal detectionist who'd stumbled upon some Roman or Viking artifacts, which happens fairly frequently in the UK. Once again, here's Dr. Sophie Ambler.
We're really lucky in the UK in that we have a fantastic culture of metal detecting, for instance. So we have metal detecting clubs up and down the country and a lot of very responsible metal detectorists, so that we have a record of everything that's found in the ground that might be valuable to archaeologists and historians. So the cohort is there.
The more I spoke with Raymond and learned about his background as an electrical engineer and the device that he's invented, the more I started to believe. In layman's terms, using technology similar to NMRI, Raymond's built a handheld device he calls Merlin.
Merlin is a device. It detects elements on the periodic table. Now, these elements individually are identified and unique. A diamond, a piece of gold, a piece of silver is different. It has a value. Albert Einstein had said every element has a frequency. Gold, silver, diamonds, sapphires, rubies, they all have a signal. And it's quite a unique signal. If it says it's there, it's there.
Raymond is a fascinating man, and he's convinced that using Merlin, he's already located King John's fabled treasure. But As I've learned through the course of my investigation, big ideas don't always lead to big results. Remember when I found that 400-year-old French map that was going to bust this case wide open? Yeah, that map. And for a man who's betting the house on an unproven technology, everything hangs on just one question. Does Merlin really work?
I spent a lot of time in research looking at open objects. I gave a couple of friends of mine some gold sovereigns to go and hide. This was a test. They came back and said, all right, go find them. So I switched Merlin on. It only took less than 15, 20 minutes. I located an area, probably about 10 feet in diameter. The first one, we were astounded, I found it. The second time, it was in a little canyon. And again, I got within a diameter of 10 feet. And I went, wow, I've got something.
Raymond's historical research and methodical approach to locating King John's lost treasure, plus all the preliminary signals, seemed to me to be far more than coincidental. So Raymond took his newly tested technology out into the wash and turned to King John's lost treasure.
I spent over a year working on Merlin. When I came back to England, I started looking at historical events where things went missing, treasures. I was looking for an area which was uncontaminated. Now, King John lost his stuff in 1216. So I figured that the area where he lost it, it won't be contaminated. Now, these things are normally found by human intervention or construction or by accident. And I specifically went looking for a bowl full of things for horseshoes. The iron horseshoes that give off a signal. It wasn't uncommon for horseshoes to be lost all the way up to the 1950s because animals were used for agricultural means for farming the land. I was looking for a high density of horseshoes. I was also aware that some high-value items had been lost. So while I was testing for gold and silver. When I approached the A16 at Sutton Bridge, I got a signal, and this signal was unique. I'd already located a lot of horseshoe signals, so I switched it. I switched the specimen over to silver, and I got a massive signal. And I dialed in on it. It said it was 30 pounds, and then it was telling me it was 60 pounds, and I went, what the hell is this?
Is it possible? Is Raymond really on the verge of unearthing the greatest lost treasure in English history? What has he found? What happens next? And are we really on the precipice of rewriting history?
It would be the archaeological find of the century so far, and probably the century before. It would be on a par with something like the Sutton Hoo treasure. If you found King John's treasure, it would be on that sort of scale.
Next time on Blood and Treasure, the last days of Bad King John.
Blood and Treasure, the last days of Bad King John, is hosted by Daryl Perkins. Written by Daryl Perkins and Rob Jenners. Produced by Ernesto Hurtado's Rebel Talk Network. With guest booking, talent coordination, and production help from Carrie Kulikowski. And mixed in cooperation with Jenners Multimedia and Co-Host Studios. Please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. Thank you for listening to Blood and Treasure, the last days of Bad King John.